The air at 0430 clung to skin like sweat that hadn't formed yet. Humid, heavy, dark enough that the floodlights over Naval Amphibious Base Coronado cast long shadows that looked sharper than they were. Boots hit gravel in uneven rhythm. Breath fogged and vanished. 30 SEAL candidates stood at parade rest near the endurance lanes, some bouncing on their toes, some still shaking off sleep. All waiting. Lieutenant Commander Sloan Mercer didn't bounce. She didn't blink either. She stood at the head of the formation, arms behind her back, posture straight, but not stiff. Her uniform was plain, no decorations showing. Her frame was lean, compact, not the kind of build that screamed power, just economy, precision, like a blade that had been sharpened down to its core purpose and nothing else. It was her first official day back in the field. Not logistics, not recon analysis, not desk work. Mobility instruction. A reassignment that had raised eyebrows across the compound. She's recon, not combat. Probably hasn't done a full pack run since BUD/S. I give her 3 days before she's back behind a desk. The whispers had started the moment her name appeared on the roster. Sloan didn't respond to them. She never did. Words were just noise until someone backed them up with action. And she'd learned a long time ago that the loudest voices rarely belonged to the most dangerous people. Endurance lanes. One of the senior instructors called out, clipboard in hand. Sprint rotation. Go on my mark. He glanced at his stopwatch. 3, 2, 1, mark. They moved. Gravel kicked up in clouds. Breathing thickened immediately. The first 50 meters separated the cocky from the conditioned, the way it always did. Bodies surged forward like a wave breaking against an invisible shore. But Sloan didn't surge. She paced. Short strides, low to the ground, arms tight to her ribs. Her rhythm was metronomic, steady, efficient, almost mechanical. She didn't look like she was sprinting. She looked like she was calibrating every step, measuring angles, reading the terrain like a topographic map only she could see. Petty Officer Garrett Thorne, tall and thick-necked, barreled ahead early. One of the base's fastest on paper, known for it. He led through the first bend, boots pounding hard enough to leave divots in the gravel. His crew followed close behind. Bishop, Vaughn, Grant. All of them grinning like they'd already won. But Sloan didn't change pace. She just curved in tighter, cutting the angle, shaving distance. Every turn was geometry. Every stride was physics. Momentum plus gravity plus the smallest possible expenditure of energy. Second lap, she was even with Thorne. Third, she pulled ahead by 2 strides, then 3, then 5. One of the SEALs muttered under his breath, "No way." She crossed the line 5 seconds before Thorne did. Her chest didn't heave. She didn't glance back. Just walked off the track like it was any other drill. Like she hadn't just dismantled the base record in front of 30 men who thought they knew what fast looked like. Time? The instructor asked, frowning at his stopwatch. Another instructor clicked his pen. New record for this cycle, 8 seconds clean. There was a pause. Then just the sound of boots crunching slower across gravel. No cheers, no applause, just silence and the faint hum of floodlights overhead. The kind of silence that felt heavier than noise. Thorne's jaw flexed as he stepped off the track. Sweat streaked down his cheek. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to. Everyone else was. That afternoon during wall climb drills, she did it again. 5 seconds off the standing record. No wasted motion, just left foot, right foot, pull, hook, clear the top. Over and down before most had even chalked their hands. Her fingers never slipped. Her breath never stuttered. She moved like water finding the path of least resistance. By dinner, half the unit had already lost money on bets they shouldn't have made. She didn't sit with anyone in the mess hall. She ate alone. Not out of exclusion, out of focus. Tray in front of her, fork moving methodically. She didn't look around, Didn't acknowledge the stares, just cut her steamed carrots with the same precision she'd used on the course. The mess hall was louder that night than usual. Forks scraped trays. Plastic cups thudded against steel tabletops. Conversations layered into a constant hum, some about ammo weights, some about weekend liberty, most about her. She runs. Doesn't mean she fights. That sprint was a fluke. Watch her gas out tomorrow with weight. At the center of it all sat Garrett Thorne. Posture leaned back, arms stretched wide, boots up on an empty chair like he owned the floor. His crew flanked him. Bishop on the left, broad-shouldered and quiet. Vaughn on the right, wiry and sharp-eyed. Grant across the table, thick fingers drumming against plastic. All of them grinning like they'd already won something. "She's a marathoner," Thorne said, picking at a protein bar. "Distance legs. They give out when it matters." Someone asked, "You going to challenge her?" He chuckled, shook his head. "What for? She'll fold on her own. Tomorrow's weighted course will snap her like a twig." A few others nodded. One of the newer guys added, 50 says she doesn't make it past checkpoint 3. Thorne raised a brow. "You betting against her?" The guy hesitated, then said, "Betting on physics." A murmur of agreement passed through the table. Someone laughed. Another slapped the tabletop twice for emphasis. Across the room, Sloane sat in the same spot as yesterday. Same tray, mostly untouched. She didn't flinch when her name came up in conversation. Didn't look over. Just sliced through her food like she was working a problem set. Like every bite was a variable she needed to isolate and solve. From the corner of the hall, someone else was watching too. Master Chief Dalton Ashford stood near the coffee station, mug in hand, eyes tracking the room with the kind of patience that only came from 4 decades of reading people. 67 years old, retired SEAL, Cold War veteran, senior tactical advisor now. His face was lined like a map of every operation he'd ever run, every decision that had kept him alive when others hadn't been so lucky. He didn't look at Sloane directly, didn't need to. He'd already seen enough. The way she moved, the way she calculated, the way she ate alone, not because she was lonely, but because she was preparing. He'd seen that look before, a long time ago, in someone else, someone who hadn't made it. His jaw tightened, just slightly. Then he turned and walked out. Next morning, Sloane arrived at the weighted obstacle course before the others. No fanfare, just a 50-pound pack strapped evenly across her shoulders. Boots laced tight, knees double-wrapped under her trousers. She stood at the starting line, hands loose at her sides, breathing slow and even. Thorne's crew came up behind her, louder this time, confident. "Morning, ma'am," one said with a mock salute. "Need help lifting that?" She didn't answer. She just stepped onto the line and waited for the signal. The course was brutal by design. Ropes, trench crawls, wall traverses, mud pits, incline climbs, gear lifts, 8 checkpoints, timed, monitored, built to break rhythm and lungs in pride. She didn't run, she flowed. Every obstacle was a formula. Climb, drop to knees, hook, elbow, use gravity. She never overextended, never powered through with brute force. She timed her breath to the weight shift, the footing, the grit under her boots. Effective over strength, angles over aggression. At checkpoint 3, where they said she'd fold, she rolled her shoulder, adjusted her wrist strap, and kept going without pausing. By checkpoint 6, the whispers had stopped. She finished with 32 seconds left on the master clock. When she stepped off the course, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. The silence behind her said enough. She unlaced her boots at the edge of the track. Quiet, calm, same as yesterday. She didn't smile. She didn't have to. Thorne stood 20 yards away, arms crossed, jaw tight. His crew said nothing, just watched. For the first time all week, they weren't grinning. The base was quieter at night, after lights out. Only the hum of floodlights remained, low, constant, like an engine refusing to rest. Sloane finished locking the final equipment cage near the supply depot. Her breath formed in short bursts of steam in the cool air. The yard smelled of metal and oil, the way it always did after a long day of drills. She was halfway across the gravel when she heard footsteps behind her. Not hurried, not cautious, just confident. Thorne's voice followed, light, mocking. "Working late, Lieutenant. Didn't peg you for the overachiever type." Sloane turned slowly, spine straight. "Just securing what you left lying around." 3 others stood behind him, half in shadow: Bishop, Vaughn, Grant, all with that look, the one that started as amusement and ended in something darker. "Relax," Thorne said, stepping closer. "We're just here to talk." Sloane didn't buy it. The space between the armory wall and the supply racks was a blind spot. No cameras, no witnesses. She knew because she checked earlier. Protocol. Always check your exits. Always know the terrain. She stepped back once, steadying her stance. "Then talk." Vaughn smirked. "You embarrassed half the platoon this morning." "I just ran," she said. "Yeah," Bishop added, "like a rabbit." The air thickened. She could feel her pulse, slow but precise. Her right hand drifted closer to her belt, not for a weapon, just measuring distance, calculating angles, the same way she'd run the course. Thorne's tone dropped lower. "You made us look weak, Lieutenant. That doesn't sit right." She didn't blink. "Then, run faster." It should have ended there. A warning, an insult, another line drawn in dirt. But pride was a weapon in the wrong hands, and Garrett Thorne had been holding it too long. He lunged first, fast, committed, but Sloane had already read the shift in his weight. She pivoted left, grabbed his forearm, used his momentum to throw him sideways into the gravel. One fluid motion, clean, textbook. It would have ended there too. Except Vaughn came next, swinging low. She sidestepped, drove her elbow into his chest, heard the wind leave him in a rush. The third one hit her from behind. Grant, heavy, strong. She stumbled, but didn't fall. Her shoulder caught against the concrete lip of the rack. Sharp pain flared through the old injury, the one from Afghanistan, the surgery scar that was still pink under her uniform. She turned sharply, too sharply, and they were on her before balance could return. A hand gripped her collar. Another clamped on her shoulder, pulling her down. Thorne's voice came closer, angrier now. "You think speed makes you a SEAL?" He caught her knee, twisted hard. The sound wasn't loud, but it was final. A clean, wet crack. Then another. Pain radiated upward, sharp, dizzying, impossible to ignore. But she didn't scream, didn't move, just stared past them, expression blank, like she was filing away every detail, every face, every second. Bishop stepped back first, eyes wide. "She's done." Thorne looked down at her, jaw tight. His breathing was heavy. No report, no shame. "Understood?" Boots crunched away across gravel, then silence. For a moment, only her breathing filled the yard. Shallow, controlled, stubborn. Then she moved, crawled forward, palms dragging against grit. Every inch carved with pain she wouldn't voice. She left a thin trail of blood behind her, not from her legs, from her hands. The gravel had torn through skin, but she didn't stop, didn't slow, just kept moving. One hand, then the other, dragging herself toward the barracks door like she was still on a mission, like the objective was still ahead. By the time she reached the door, she'd stopped shaking. She hadn't screamed once. From the shadows near the admin building, Master Chief Dalton Ashford stood motionless. He'd watched it all. Every second, every broken bone, every moment she refused to break. His hands were clenched at his sides, knuckles white. His jaw worked once, twice. Then he turned and walked into the darkness. He hadn't intervened. Not because he didn't care, but because he knew. Some battles you had to let people fight alone. So when they won, no one could ever take it away from them. The infirmary light flickered once before holding steady. Sloane sat upright on the edge of the cot, hands folded in her lap, legs braced in carbon fiber splints from thigh to ankle. She hadn't asked what the diagnosis was, didn't need to. She'd felt the bones give, knew the sound, knew the damage. Across the room, Commander James Holbrook watched her in silence. He was career Navy, tall, lean, salt and grit hair pulled tight beneath his cover. He'd read her file a dozen times before this moment, knew her citations, her rank, her decade with Force Recon before she rotated to Coronado as an instructor. But files didn't prepare you for this, especially not the way she looked at him now. Steady, unblinking, like she was already 10 steps ahead. "You should have filed the report," he said. "I didn't come here to litigate weakness." He paced once, slow, then stopped. "Lieutenant Commander Mercer, your legs are broken. I'm aware." A silence stretched between them. She didn't flinch. "It won't matter," she added. He folded his arms. "You think you're teaching anyone anything limping around this compound? I don't need to walk to teach discipline." He exhaled once. Sharp. "You're not the first operator to get jumped. But the SEALs don't run on personal vendettas. I'm not filing charges." Holbrook's brow lifted. "Why?" Sloane tilted her head slightly. "Because I already know what they fear most." He didn't reply. She continued. "They fear exposure, sure. But more than that, they fear a woman who comes back, who doesn't crawl into protocol, who doesn't need an investigation to remember names." He looked at her like he didn't know whether to reprimand her or salute her. "Mercer," he began, but she raised a hand. Not rudely, just clearly. "I need 7 days," she said. "That's all." "To do what?" Her voice didn't rise. "To finish what I started." Holbrook studied her for a long moment. "You realize what that sounds like. It's not revenge." He didn't respond. "I've already won," she said softly. "They just don't know it yet." The lights buzzed overhead. After a long pause, Holbrook crossed to the cabinet, removed a folder, tossed it on the table beside her. "Fine," he said. 7 days. You're on medical leave." Sloane didn't move. "That's not what I asked for." He stared. "I want range access, off hours, minimal supervision." "You can't stand." She looked up. "I don't need to." Holbrook let out a low breath. "And when the board asks where I was when you limped back into a combat bay, you'll say I was recovering. Alone." He studied her, then slowly nodded. "You've got 1 week, Mercer. Then I have to put this whole thing in writing." She nodded. "You won't need to." As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Why not?" Sloane didn't even look up. "Because they'll write it for you." The door closed behind him with a soft click. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the ventilation system. Then footsteps, slower, heavier, different from Holbrook's. Master Chief Dalton Ashford stepped into the light. He didn't ask permission, didn't announce himself, just stood there, hands behind his back, eyes fixed on her with the kind of intensity that had outlasted decades and wars and losses most people couldn't imagine. Sloane met his gaze, didn't flinch, didn't speak first. Ashford's voice was low, graveled. "Commander Mercer, Master Chief." He stepped closer. "I saw what happened." She didn't react. "Then you know why I'm not filing." He nodded once. "I also know you're planning something. Just recovery." His eyes narrowed. "Don't lie to a man who's been doing this since before you were born." A pause. Then Sloane's expression shifted. Just barely. Not a smile, but something close. Acknowledgement. 7 days, she said. Range access. That's all I need. Ashford studied her. Then slowly he pulled a chair over and sat. Not across from her, beside her. Like they were on the same side of the table, the same side of the line. "You remind me of someone," he said quietly. A long time ago. She was Force Recon 2, specialist, best tactical mind I ever saw. But when they came for her, she didn't fight back. She quit, said it wasn't worth the fight. Sloane's jaw tightened. What happened to her? Ashford's eyes darkened. She left the service, died in a car accident 2 years later, and I spent the next 40 years wondering if I'd done enough to make her stay. Silence settled between them. Heavy, final. I won't quit, Sloane said. I know. That's why I'm here. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small notebook, handed it to her. Inside were diagrams, techniques, movements, all hand-drawn, dated, some from the 1970s, some from the 1980s. What is this, she asked. The Redoubt Doctrine, he said. Cold War combat system. Designed for operatives who got injured behind enemy lines. Soviet, American, didn't matter. If you couldn't run, you learned to fight smarter. Used gravity, terrain, psychology, made the enemy think you were weaker than you were. Then turned that assumption into a weapon. Sloane flipped through the pages. Her eyes scanned each diagram, each note. She didn't speak, just absorbed. You're going to teach me this. Ashford nodded. Starting tomorrow night, 0200 hours. Reflex Bay 3. No one uses it after midnight. In Holbrook? Ashford's expression didn't change. I'll supervise personally. That was the deal, wasn't it? She looked at him. Really looked. Not at the rank, not at the age. At the man who'd just chosen a side. Who'd decided that 40 years of regret was enough. Why? She asked. Because I failed her, Ashford said quietly. I won't fail you. He stood, adjusted his cover, turned toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Mercer. Yes? When you go back out there, don't just beat them. Make sure the whole world is watching when you do. And with that, he walked out, leaving Sloane alone in the infirmary light, legs broken, hands bloody, but eyes sharper than they'd ever been. She looked down at the notebook, flipped to the first page, read the inscription at the top. Disability is only tactical if you let the enemy dictate terms. She closed the book, set it on her lap, and for the first time since the attack, she smiled. Not because it was over, but because it had just begun. They said the range was closed for maintenance. They weren't wrong. At 0200 hours, no one checked. No clipboard logs, no drills scheduled. Just the echo of metal pulleys, the dry scrape of sandbags dragged across concrete, and the rhythmic thud of elbow strikes on a suspended dummy. Lieutenant Commander Sloane Mercer moved like gravity was optional. She couldn't run, she couldn't kneel, but she'd memorized every square inch of Reflex Bay 3 before the week ever started. And now she was turning it into her own war room. The braces that locked her knees in place had been modified. Reinforced inner pivots, shock-absorbing plates. She'd gutted an old halo harness for weight balance and stitched the frame into a low-slung webbing rig that sat flush against her hips. No ankle rotation, limited step drive, but she didn't need it. She pivoted with her upper body, counterbalanced on one crutch, and every strike came from core torque, not limb leverage. Wham! Thud. Wham! Sweat dripped from her temple. Her right forearm was bleeding. A shallow scrape from missing the bag's return swing 15 minutes ago. She hadn't flinched then either. The key wasn't strength, it was timing. She'd mapped the bay acoustics from memory, timed each breath, each footfall, each rubber bounce off the foam wall mats. If she could intercept a live shooter's reload from 10 feet blindfolded, she could anticipate a trainee centerline charge. On her 50th strike, her right crutch gave a warning shudder. A screw had loosened. She paused, reset, tightened it with a utility blade from her belt, then stood again. Not once did she check the mirror. Not once did she rewatch footage. She wasn't preparing for applause. She was preparing for interruption. Behind the steel door, a faint pair of footsteps approached. Quiet, intentional. Not a patrol route. She didn't turn. The door didn't open. Just a pause. Then a soft retreat. Whoever it was had seen enough. Master Chief Dalton Ashford entered Reflex Bay 3 at exactly 02:15 hours. No announcement, no pleasantries, just the sound of boots on concrete and the faint smell of old coffee on his breath. He carried a duffel bag in one hand and the same weathered notebook he'd given Sloane the night before in the other. She was standing in the center of the room, both crutches planted, breathing controlled, waiting. Ashford set the duffel down, didn't speak right away, just walked a slow circle around her, observing, calculating, the same way a sculptor might study a block of marble before the first strike. "You've been drilling solo," he said. "2 hours every night. Show me." She moved. Not fast, not flashy, just efficient. She dropped her left crutch, let it clatter to the floor, used both hands to grab an invisible opponent, rotated her torso like a fulcrum, her right leg locked in place, her left knee bent just enough to shift her center of gravity. Then she pivoted, hard. The motion ended with her elbow driving forward into empty air. Ashford nodded. "Good. But you're still thinking like someone who has legs." "I do have legs. Not anymore. Not for this." He stepped closer, picked up the crutch, handed it back to her. The redoubt doctrine isn't about compensating for injury. It's about weaponizing it. You make them think you're vulnerable. You let them come in confident. Then you use their momentum against them. But first, you have to stop thinking like a runner. Start thinking like a trap. Sloane's eyes narrowed. "I'm listening." Ashford opened the notebook, flipped to a page covered in diagrams, angles, vectors, force distributions. It looked more than engineering schematic than a combat manual. "This," he said, tapping the page, "is the core principle. Gravity wells. You create a zone around your body where anyone who enters has already lost. Because you've calculated every possible angle of attack, every shift in weight, every opening they think they see." He demonstrated, dropped into a seated position on the floor, one leg extended, one bent, both hands loose at his sides. Then he gestured for Sloane to attack. She hesitated. "You're serious." "Dead serious." She moved in, slow at first, testing. She reached for his shoulder. Before her hand made contact, Ashford rotated, used his bent leg to hook behind her ankle. Pulled. She stumbled forward. His hand came up, stopped just short of her throat. "You're down," he said, and I never stood up. Sloane stared at him, then nodded, again. They drilled for the next hour, over and over. Ashford showed her how to create false openings, how to make an opponent commit their weight before they realized they'd already lost balance, how to use a crutch not as a support, but as a lever, a fulcrum, a weapon. Every technique had a name: ground anchor, pendulum sweep, torsion lock. Some of them dated back to the 1970s, others were newer. Adaptations Ashford had developed over decades of watching operatives survive situations that should have killed them. "You developed all of this?" Sloane asked during a water break. Ashford shook his head. "I compiled it. Most of these techniques came from people smarter than me. Soviet operatives who got injured in Afghanistan, American POWs who escaped camps with broken limbs, a French Foreign Legion medic who fought off insurgents with a shattered pelvis." He paused, took a sip from his canteen. The one thing they all had in common? They stopped trying to be what they were before. They became something else, something their enemies didn't expect. Sloane wiped sweat from her face. "And the woman you mentioned? The specialist?" Ashford's expression darkened. "She never got that far. She quit before I could teach her." "Why?" "Because she thought the fight wasn't worth it. Thought she'd lose more by staying than by leaving. And she was wrong. She lost everything anyway." Silence settled between them, heavy, final. Then Sloane stood, adjusted her braces, looked Ashford in the eye. "I'm not her. I know." They trained until 0500 hours. By the time the first light started creeping through the high windows of Reflex Bay 3, Sloan had run through the core sequences 40 times. Her hands were raw, her shoulders burned, but her movements were sharper, cleaner, more deliberate. Ashford packed the notebook back into his duffel. Tomorrow night, same time, we'll add live resistance. Sloan nodded. I'll be ready. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. One more thing, Mercer. Yes? They're going to try again. You know that, right? I'm counting on it. Ashford's jaw tightened. Just make sure you're ready when they do. And then he was gone. Sloan stood alone in the bay. The floodlights outside were starting to dim as dawn approached. She looked down at her hands, bleeding, calloused, stronger than they'd been 2 days ago. She wasn't recovering, she was evolving. On the third night, Ashford brought sandbags, not the standard issue training bags, custom ones, weighted to match human body mass, 160, 180, 200 pounds. He set them up at different heights, different angles, then stepped back. These are your opponents, he said. They don't get tired, they don't hold back, and they don't care if you're injured. Sloan looked at the bags, then at Ashford. You want me to fight sandbags? I want you to learn how bodies fall, how weight shifts, how momentum works when you're not the one generating it. He walked over to the nearest bag, gave it a hard shove. It swung toward Sloan. She stepped back instinctively. Wrong, Ashford said. You don't retreat, you redirect. He reset the bag, shoved it again. This time he stepped into the swing, used his shoulder to catch the bag at an angle. The momentum carried past him. The bag swung wide, missed completely. You see, Ashford said, same force, different outcome. Because I didn't try to stop it, I just changed its path. Sloan nodded. Let me try. For the next 2 hours, she drilled with the bags, learning how to read the swing, how to time her body rotation, how to use the crutch to deflect instead of block. Every collision taught her something new. Every mistake refined her understanding. By the end of the session, she wasn't retreating anymore. She was dancing, moving in and out of the bag's paths like water flowing around stones. Ashford watched from the corner, arms crossed, expression unreadable. But when she finally stopped, breathing hard, he nodded once. Better. Much better. On the fourth night, Ashford didn't bring equipment. He brought a story. They sat on the floor of Reflex Bay 3, backs against the wall, Sloan's legs stretched out in front of her, braces gleaming under the overhead lights. You asked about the specialist, Ashford said. The one I mentioned. Sloan didn't respond, just waited. Her name was Captain Erin Voss, Marine Force Recon, 1981. Same base, same job you have now. She was the first woman to make it through the advanced mobility course without special accommodation. Broke 3 records in 1 week. He paused, took a breath. The men didn't like it. 5 of them cornered her in the equipment yard, same place you got hit. Beat her bad enough that she couldn't walk for a month. Sloan's jaw tightened. Did she report it? Ashford shook his head. She came to me instead. Said if she filed charges, it would kill the program. Women in combat roles were still new back then. Controversial. She thought if she made a scene, it would set everything back a decade. And you told her to report it anyway. I told her she had a choice, that whatever she decided, I'd support her. Ashford's voice dropped lower, quieter. She chose silence. Said she'd handle it herself, train harder, prove them wrong through performance. But 3 months later, she quit. Said the weight of staying was too much, that every day on base felt like drowning. What happened to her? Ashford looked down at his hands. She moved to civilian contracting, worked private security for a while. Then one night, she drove off a bridge in North Carolina. Single car accident, no witnesses. Sloan didn't speak, just absorbed the weight of what he was saying. The official report called it an accident, Ashford continued. but I've read enough accident reports to know the difference. She gave up. And I've spent 40 years wondering if I pushed her toward the wrong choice. You didn't push her anywhere. She made her call. Maybe, but I didn't fight hard enough to change her mind. I let her believe that silence was strength, and it killed her. He turned to look at Sloan, eyes hard, serious. That's why I'm here, Mercer. That's why I'm teaching you this, because I won't make the same mistake twice. You want to fight back? I'll give you the tools. But when you do it loud. You make sure everyone sees, everyone knows, so no one can ever bury it again. Sloan met his gaze, held it. I'm not planning to stay silent. Good, because the moment you step back into that corridor, the whole base is going to be watching. And what you do next will define whether women like Aaron Voss died for nothing, or if they paved the way for someone who finished what they started. On the fifth night, the door to Reflex Bay 3 opened before Ashford arrived. Sloan turned, expecting the Master Chief. Instead, she saw a woman in fatigues, late 20s, short, dark hair, sharp eyes, specialist rank on her collar. Commander Mercer, the woman said. I'm Specialist Kira Duval, IT Security. Sloan straightened. Can I help you, Specialist? Kira stepped inside, closed the door behind her. She carried a tablet under one arm and a USB drive in her hand. I need to show you something, and I need to do it before Master Chief Ashford gets here. Sloan's eyes narrowed. Why? Because this involves him, and I don't know if he wants you to see it yet. Kira crossed the room, set the tablet on a bench, plugged in the USB drive. A file directory appeared on the screen, dozens of folders, all labeled with dates, all time-stamped within the last 4 months. What am I looking at? Sloan asked. Access logs, Kira said, from the base personnel database. Someone's been pulling classified training files, injury reports, psychological evaluations, all under an admin clearance code. Whose code? Kira tapped the screen. A name appeared. Petty Officer Garrett Thorne. Sloan's expression didn't change, but her pulse quickened. How many times? 17 over the last 4 months. He's been researching you since before you even arrived at Coronado. Kira opened another folder. Security footage, the supply depot, the night of the attack. But the timestamp was wrong. The video started 3 minutes after Sloan had been jumped. The part where Thorne and his crew walked away. The part where she crawled toward the barracks. He deleted the first half, Kira said. The part where they attacked you. Scrubbed it from the system. Or tried to. Sloan looked up. Tried to? Kira smiled. Faintly. I run a secondary backup protocol. Off-site server. He didn't know it existed. So I have everything. The full footage. Every second. She pulled up another file. Audio. Sloan recognized the location immediately. The supply closet near the depot. The one with the environmental monitoring system. This mic is supposed to be off after 2,100 hours, Kira said, but the system glitched 2 weeks ago. It's been recording everything. She hit play. Thorne's voice came through the speakers. You sure this will work? Another voice. Bishop. She won't fight back. She can't. Not after what happened in Afghanistan. That complaint went nowhere. This won't either. Sloan's blood went cold. What happened in Afghanistan? Kira asked. Sloan didn't answer, just stared at the screen. Kira paused the audio. There's more, but I think you need to hear the rest with Ashford present. Why? Because he's the one who asked me to pull these files. The door opened. Master Chief Dalton Ashford stepped inside. He looked at Kira, then at Sloan, then at the tablet. You told her, he said. Kira nodded. She deserves to know. Ashford walked over. Looked down at the screen. His jaw was tight, expression unreadable. How much did you show her? Just the access logs, the deleted footage, and the audio clip. Ashford turned to Sloan. We need to talk, all three of us. They sat in a triangle on the floor of Reflex Bay 3, the tablet between them, the weight of what was about to be said pressing down like atmosphere before a storm. Ashford spoke first. 9 months ago, you filed a complaint, sexual harassment, a contractor at a forward operating base in Afghanistan. The complaint disappeared. No investigation, no charges, just a quiet reassignment back to the States. Sloane's voice was flat. How do you know about that? Because I'm the one who's been investigating it for the last 9 months. She stared at him. Why? Because 3 months ago I got a call from a friend at JAG, Judge Advocate General's office. He told me there'd been a pattern, multiple complaints, multiple women, all involving the same contractor. All of them buried, all of them reassigned. Ashford leaned forward. Your name was on that list, Mercer. And when I saw you were being transferred to Coronado, I started digging. I wanted to know if the reassignment was legitimate or if someone was trying to bury you. And I found Garrett Thorne. His uncle is Colonel Marcus Thorne, retired, currently working as a military liaison for the same contracting firm you filed the complaint against. Sloane's hands clenched. You're saying this was coordinated. I'm saying Thorne knew exactly who you were before you ever stepped foot on this base. He knew about the complaint. He knew it had been buried. And he knew that if he could break you here, publicly, it would discredit you permanently. Make sure you never filed another complaint, never became a problem again. Kira spoke up. That's why he's been accessing your files. He was looking for weaknesses, injuries, psych evaluations, anything he could use. Sloane looked at the tablet, then back at Ashford. So you've known this whole time, since before the attack? Ashford nodded. I've been building a case, collecting evidence, waiting for the right moment. And you didn't tell me. No. Why? Because I needed to see if you'd fight back on your own, if you'd file a report, if you'd go through channels. He paused. But you didn't. You asked for 7 days in range access. You started training, and that's when I knew. You weren't planning to go through channels. You were planning to make them irrelevant. Sloane's voice was quiet, dangerous. So what now? Now, Ashford said, we finish what we started. You train, you prepare, and when they come for you again, you make sure the whole world is watching. Because I'm going to make sure every piece of evidence Kira and I have collected ends up in front of the right people. The Senate Armed Services Committee, the Inspector General, the press if we have to. He looked her dead in the eye. But it only works if you don't break, if you stand up, if you prove that no matter what they did to you, they couldn't make you disappear. Sloane was silent for a long moment. Then she looked at Kira. You've been helping him this whole time. Kira nodded. Since Afghanistan. I was the one who flagged your complaint in the system before it got scrubbed. I kept a copy. And when I saw you were coming to Coronado, I reached out to Master Chief Ashford. Why? Because you're not the first woman this happened to. And if we don't stop it here, you won't be the last. Sloane looked at both of them. These two people who had decided, independently, that her fight was worth fighting, that her silence was worth breaking. Thank you, she said quietly. Ashford stood, offered her a hand. She took it, pulled herself up. Don't thank us yet, he said. We've still got 2 days of training left, and tomorrow night we go full contact. On the 6th night, Ashford brought a sparring partner, a junior instructor, built like a linebacker, 220 pounds of muscle and bone. He walked into Reflex Bay 3 with the cautious respect of someone who'd been briefed but didn't fully believe. Commander, he said, nodding to Sloane. She nodded back, didn't speak. Ashford stood between them. This is Petty Officer Rains. He's going to try to take you down. No holding back. You ready? Sloane adjusted her braces, checked the tension on her crutch grips. Yes. Rains hesitated. Ma'am, I don't want to hurt you. You won't. Ashford stepped back. Go. Rains moved in. Slow at first, testing. He reached for her shoulder. Sloan rotated, let his hand pass over her, used the crutch to hook behind his ankle. Pulled. Rains stumbled forward. Her elbow came up, stopped just short of his temple. Down, Ashford called. Rains blinked, stepped back, tried again. This time faster, more committed. He grabbed her collar, pulled, but Sloan had already shifted her weight. She fell with him, let gravity do the work, then used her locked leg as a brace. Pushed off, drove her shoulder into his chest. Rains hit the mat hard. Down, Ashford said again. They went 15 rounds. By the end, Rains was breathing hard. Sloan was barely winded. Ashford dismissed Rains. The young officer left without a word, just a respectful nod toward Sloan. When the door closed, Ashford turned to her. You're ready. One more day. No, you're ready now. Tomorrow night is just insurance. On the 7th night, Sloan trained alone. Ashford didn't come. Kira didn't come. Just Sloan in the empty bay and the weight of what was about to happen. She ran through the sequences one last time. Every technique, every angle, every calculated response. Her body moved like a machine, precise, efficient, unbreakable. When she finished, she stood in the center of the room, both crutches planted, breathing controlled. And for the first time in 7 days, she allowed herself to think about what came next. They would come for her again. She knew that. Thorne wouldn't let it end with broken legs. His pride wouldn't allow it. And when he came, she would be ready. Not just to fight back, but to make sure everyone saw. Everyone knew. Everyone understood that silence was not the same as surrender. She looked down at the notebook Ashford had given her. The Redoubt Doctrine. 40 years of survival techniques. 40 years of people who refused to break. And now it was hers. The next morning, a message appeared on Sloan's bunk. Unofficial, no signature, just a time and a location. Final clearance drill, Reflex Bay 2, 1900 hours. She read it twice, then placed it on her pillow. Folded, neat. Across the base, Master Chief Dalton Ashford sat in his office, phone to his ear, speaking quietly. Yes, Senator, tomorrow night, Reflex Bay 2. I'll make sure you have the access codes. He hung up, looked at the wall, at the photos of men and women he'd served with over 4 decades. Some still alive, some not. All of them warriors in their own right. But tomorrow, he thought, we're going to show them what a real warrior looks like. The air inside Reflex Bay 2 felt different, heavier, like the walls themselves knew something was about to happen. Red overhead beams cut through the darkness in geometric patterns, sharp, clinical, the kind of lighting that made everything look like evidence. Sloan Mercer stood at the far end of the bay, no rank visible on her vest, no brace evident beneath the low-profile combat trousers, just one crutch held in her right hand. She stood with her weight back, left shoulder relaxed, spine centered, and said nothing. Across from her, Petty Officer Garrett Thorne cracked his neck. Same cocky smirk, same bandaged knuckles. He hadn't said a word since the incident, not to her, not to command. But he'd made one bet too many, and now he'd volunteered for final clearance drills. 3 others joined him, Bishop, Vaughn, Grant, all from the same barracks row, all grinning like they'd already won something. The kind of grin that came from men who'd never been told no, who'd never faced consequences, who thought power was something you took instead of something you earned. A combat camera operator stood in the corner, lens pointed at the center of the room, recording everything. Next to him, a range supervisor with a clipboard. No safety officers, no medic techs, just witnesses. Thorne stepped forward, rolled his shoulders. You sure you don't want to sit this one out, Commander? He didn't say it loud, just enough for the camera's microphone to catch. Sloan didn't respond, didn't move. Just watched him with the kind of patience that predators have right before they strike. Range control gave the nod. The buzzer chirped once, and the room exploded. Grant came first, Center line, fast, committed. A feint to the left designed to bait her weight distribution. But Sloane didn't commit. She sidestepped off axis, let the man clip her shoulder, then rotated off her brace like a hinge. Elbow strike, sharp, precise, direct to the solar plexus. Grant's breath left him in a rush. His eyes went wide. Before he could recover, Sloane's crutch came around. Not a swing, a measured arc. The grip caught him just below the collarbone, exactly where the nerve cluster sat. He went down, hard, didn't get back up. One down. Vaughn didn't wait. He came in before Grant hit the mat. Faster, heavier. He grabbed her midsection, drove her back against the wall. Exactly what the doctrine predicted. Exactly what she'd trained for. Sloane didn't fight the push. She fell with it. Let him think he had control. Let him commit all his weight forward. Then she braced her right boot against his hip, used the wall as leverage, and drove the crutch up under his jaw with surgical force. Not hard enough to break bone, just hard enough to shut down his nervous system for 3 seconds. It was enough. Vaughn's knees buckled. He dropped like someone had cut his strings. 2 down. Thorne didn't shout orders, didn't need to. Bishop was already moving, coming in from the side, smart, tactical. He'd been watching, learning. He knew not to commit too early, but Sloane had been counting steps, measuring distances. She knew exactly where Bishop would be before he got there. She turned her body with his approach. Let him think he had the angle. Then she dropped her crutch, let it fall. Used both hands, one to grab the incoming fist, the other to rotate her own torso like a lever. Bishop's momentum carried him past her. She hooked her locked leg behind his boot, yanked. He went down face first, tried to catch himself. But Sloane was already moving. Her knee came down on his shoulder blade. Not enough to injure, just enough to pin. Bishop tapped the mat twice. Universal signal. I'm done. 3 down. Thorne stood alone now. The grin was gone, replaced by something harder, angrier. He looked at his crew on the floor, then back at Sloane. She was standing, one leg locked, the other trembling slightly, but she was up, and they weren't. The camera kept recording. The range supervisor's pen kept moving across the clipboard. No one spoke. No one moved. Just the sound of breathing. Heavy from Thorne, controlled from Sloane. Thorne's hands clenched, unclenched. You think this proves something? Sloane picked up her crutch, adjusted her grip. It proves you made a mistake. His jaw tightened. What mistake? Thinking I needed legs to beat you. For a moment, the air between them crystallized, taut, dangerous. Thorne took one step forward, then stopped. Something in Sloane's eyes made him hesitate. Not fear, recognition. The understanding that whatever happened next, he'd already lost. The range supervisor cleared his throat. Drill's over. Clear the bay. Thorne didn't move, just stared at Sloane. Then slowly, deliberately, he turned and walked out. His crew followed, limping, defeated, silent. The camera operator powered down his equipment, packed it away. The supervisor made a final note on his clipboard. Then they left too. Sloane stood alone in the red light, breathing through her nose, composed, alert, balanced. From the observation window above, Master Chief Dalton Ashford watched. Arms crossed, expression unreadable. But his eyes held something that looked almost like pride. 2 days passed, quiet days. The kind of quiet that felt like the base was holding its breath, waiting for something. No one spoke about the drill. No one mentioned Thorne's name. But everyone knew. Word traveled fast in closed communities. And this community was watching. Sloane went about her duties, taught her classes, ran her drills, moved through the compound with the same measured precision she'd used in Reflex Bay 2. The braces were still visible beneath her trousers, the crutch still necessary. But something had changed. The way people looked at her, The way they stepped aside when she passed. Not out of pity, out of respect. On the third day, Thorne came for her again. The supply corridor. Same location as the first attack, but this time, daylight. 1400 hours. No shadows to hide in. No blind spots, just fluorescent lights and the constant hum of the ventilation system. Sloan was restocking calibration trays, methodical work, organizing equipment that someone had intentionally scrambled 2 days earlier. She knew it was bait, knew he'd come. That was the point. Thorne's boots echoed down the corridor before his voice did. "You think you're clever." Sloan didn't look up, just continued sorting trays. "Just doing my job, petty officer. You think you can run this base with metal strapped to your legs?" She glanced at him. Calm, measured. "You're limping." He was, favoring the knee she'd swept during the drill. It hadn't healed right, probably wouldn't for months. "You cost me my record," he hissed. "You humiliated my team." Sloan placed the last tray into its designated slot, closed the drawer, turned to face him fully. "You did that." "I just removed the camouflage." Thorne stepped forward, too fast for someone thinking clearly, too committed to pull back. He grabbed for her collar, but Sloan had already calculated the angle, already measured the distance. She shifted, one brace behind his shin, her shoulder lowering to redirect his weight off center. Crack! The radius bone in Thorne's forearm snapped under his own fall. The sound echoed down the corridor like a gunshot. He screamed, high, sharp, the kind of scream that came from someone who'd never experienced real pain before. 2 of his men lunged, Vaughn and Grant, both still moving slow from the drill, both angry, both making the same mistake Thorne had made. They assumed she was vulnerable. Sloan turned with them, not away, toward. Vaughn reached for her shoulder, too high. She pivoted low, let his hand pass over her, used the momentum to drive her elbow into his ribs, then redirected his weight into the shelf edge behind her. His collarbone cracked against the metal. Different sound, sharper. He went down gasping. Grant came in low, learned from watching. He grabbed for her legs, tried to take out the braces, but Sloan had already shifted her weight to her locked knee. She brought her other leg around. Not a kick, a hook, caught behind his knee, twisted, tendons popped. The sound was wet, organic. Grant's scream was different from Thorne's, deeper, more final. 10 seconds. That's how long it took for the corridor to go silent again. Thorne was on the floor, gasping, cradling his broken arm. His eyes were wide with pain, with shock, with the dawning realization that he'd miscalculated everything. Vaughn lay beside him, breathing shallow, hands pressed against his collarbone, face twisted in agony. Grant was curled on his side, knee bent at an angle that knees weren't supposed to bend, tears streaming down his face. Silent now, the kind of silent that came from pain too deep for sound. Sloan didn't gloat, didn't speak, just stood there, breathing through her nose, composed, alert, balanced. The supply sergeant had been standing at the other end of the hall, eyes locked on the scene, clipboard in hand. He didn't move, didn't need to, just watched, witnessed, remembered. 2 instructors came running seconds later, boots pounding on linoleum. They rounded the corner, saw the scene, stopped. "Get them on stretchers," one barked into his radio. Another bent toward Thorne. "What happened?" No one answered. Not yet. But the cameras had been rolling. Inventory corridors were always monitored. Every angle, every second, every frame of Thorne making the first move. Every moment of Sloan defending herself with nothing but technique and patience. One of the security techs arrived, young, efficient. He whispered into his comm unit while watching the footage on his tablet, frowning. "We've got movement logs, keycard swipes, supply tampering." His eyes shifted toward Thorne. All under his ID. The supply sergeant finally spoke, voice steady, matter of fact. "She didn't strike first." A medic knelt beside Sloane. "Ma'am, do you want to be taken in for evaluation?" She looked at him. Quiet, direct, already done. Security sealed the corridor. Reports would be filed, logs pulled, witnesses questioned. But in that moment, bruised, embraced, Lieutenant Commander Sloane Mercer had no doubt. She hadn't run, hadn't folded. She'd simply reacted faster, cleaner, and with everything they thought they'd taken from her. The medical board gathered early, behind closed doors. In the steel and glass chamber of the Joint Evaluation Wing, 7 officers, 4 contractors, 2 senior SEALs, 1 legal representative. Their eyes were locked on screens, multiple screens, all showing different angles of the same events. Footage from the corridor, from the supply bay, from the drills, time-stamped, cataloged, undeniable. They watched Thorne's ID being used to misfile Sloane's equipment, to reroute her maintenance schedules, to access her medical files without authorization. 17 separate instances over 4 months. They saw the screw loosen from her brace rack, the heating coil unplugged from her rest chamber, the team logs showing joint physical reintegration tests falsely marked on her chart, without her signature, without her knowledge. They saw everything. And still, when Sloane walked in, silent, supported by those same titanium knee braces they'd all signed off as insufficient, several of them looked away, except one. Admiral Richard Kincaid, 70 years old, Cold War submarine commander, veteran of operations that still carried classification stamps, spine made of wire and conviction. He met her eyes, held them. "Lieutenant Commander Mercer," he said evenly, "we weren't expecting your presence at this session." Sloane stood still, braces locked, posture perfect. "You should have been." No apology, no threat, just a statement of fact. Kincaid leaned forward. "Do you believe your actions yesterday qualify as controlled response?" "Yes. You disabled 3 officers. 2 will require surgery. They attacked an injured operator with intent." The legal advisor cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses. "The footage confirms as much." He gestured to the screens. All of it. The initial assault, the sabotage, the secondary attack. Commander Mercer acted in self-defense throughout. Kincaid's fingers tapped the table once. "We've reviewed the silence clause. We know Petty Officer Thorne pushed for it." Sloane nodded. "So did the others. And it protected them until it didn't." Another board member spoke up. Older, gray-haired, cautious. "Do you want reinstatement? Because your record, if this goes to command review." "I don't want reinstatement," Sloane said. They paused, exchanged glances, confused. Kincaid studied her. "Then why are you here?" Sloane stepped forward. The braces clicked slightly as they bore her weight. "Because you're writing a report right now that defines not just what happened, but what should have happened." She placed a file on the table. Inside were printouts, incident logs, maintenance footage, proof of equipment tampering, audio recordings, and one final page, a transcript of a conversation between Thorne's crew, captured by accident on a supply closet microphone that hadn't been properly deactivated. "Don't worry," one voice said. "She won't fight back. She can't. Not after what happened in Afghanistan. That complaint went nowhere. This won't either." The room fell utterly still. Kincaid picked up the final page. "Read it." Slowly, carefully. When he looked back at Sloane, his voice was softer. "What would you have us do?" She looked at him, steady, unflinching. "Nothing for me. Just tell the truth. This time, tell it while I'm still standing." No one spoke, but slowly around the table, one by one, they began to nod. She didn't ask for revenge, didn't demand rank, didn't even correct the record. She walked into a room built to bury the truth and made them speak it. The door opened behind her. Master Chief Dalton Ashford entered. He didn't ask permission, just walked to the front of the room, stood beside Sloane, placed a thick folder on the table next to hers. "Admiral," he said, with respect, "this goes deeper than one assault." Kincaid's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Ashford opened the folder. Inside were documents, emails, phone records, financial transactions. 9 months of investigation condensed into evidence that couldn't be ignored. Petty Officer Thorne's uncle, Colonel Marcus Thorne, retired, currently employed as a military liaison for Redstone Security Contracting. He paused. The same firm Commander Mercer filed a sexual harassment complaint against 9 months ago, in Afghanistan. The room temperature seemed to drop. "That complaint disappeared," Ashford continued. "Never investigated, never filed, just erased. And 6 weeks later, Commander Mercer was reassigned stateside, not for cause, not for performance, but to make her go away." He pulled out another document, Colonel Thorne's emails, discussing Commander Mercer by name, coordinating with his nephew, making sure she was discredited before she could become a problem again. The legal advisor leaned forward. "This is obstruction of justice, conspiracy, witness intimidation." Ashford nodded. "And it's been happening for years. Commander Mercer isn't the first. She's just the first one who didn't stay quiet." Kincaid stood, walked to the window, looked out over the base, the parade grounds, the training facilities, the flags snapping in the wind. "How long have you known about this, Master Chief?" 9 months, sir. And you didn't report it?" "I did. To JAG, to the Inspector General's office, to Senator Morrison's Subcommittee on Military Justice." Kincaid turned. "You went to the Senate?" "Yes, sir. And they'll be reviewing this case next week, whether this board acts or not." Silence fell again, heavier this time, final. Kincaid returned to his seat, looked at the evidence, at Sloan, at Ashford, then at his fellow board members. "Recommendations," he said. The legal advisor spoke first. "Petty Officer Garrett Thorne, dishonorable discharge, court-martial for assault, obstruction, and conspiracy. Recommended sentence 8 to 10 years. Another officer added, Petty Officers Vaughn and Grant, demotion, suspension pending investigation, possible discharge. Bishop gets medical, someone else said. He wasn't involved in the conspiracy, just the assault." "And Colonel Thorne?" Kincaid asked. The legal advisor looked grim. "Civilian prosecution, loss of retirement benefits, possible federal charges for obstruction and conspiracy." Kincaid nodded. He looked at Sloan. "Commander Mercer, this board owes you an apology. And more than that, we owe you justice. You'll have it, all of it, on the record." Sloan's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes softened, just slightly. "Thank you, Admiral." "Don't thank me. Thank Master Chief Ashford. He's the one who made sure this didn't get buried." Ashford shook his head. "I just gave her the tools, sir. She did the rest." The sun broke clean across the eastern edge of the base by 0630. Long shadows stretched over the gravel parade grounds. Boots moved more deliberately than usual. The energy had shifted. Less noise, fewer jokes, the kind of calm that didn't come from quiet hours, but from something recently corrected. Lieutenant Commander Sloan Mercer walked the outer perimeter trail. Same posture as always. Back straight, gaze steady, hands tucked behind her lower back. No fanfare, no entourage, no medal pinned to her chest. But those who passed her now stood a touch straighter, not out of fear, out of recognition. One junior Marine, unfamiliar with her before this week, offered a quiet nod from the opposite walkway. Sloan didn't break stride, but she returned it with a glance, just enough to say, "You're learning." From the barracks walkway, Specialist Kira Duval caught up beside her, adjusted her cap as she matched Sloan's pace. "Morning, Commander." Sloan nodded. "Specialist." Kira gestured back toward the admin building. "Senate subcommittee confirmed. They'll be here next week. Full investigation." "Good." They walked in silence for a moment. Then Kira spoke again, quieter this time. You know this changes things. For all of us. Sloane glanced at her. It should have changed things a long time ago. Kira smiled, faintly. Better late than never. They reached the central quad. Kira peeled off toward the IT building. Sloane continued alone toward the instructor wing. Inside, Master Chief Dalton Ashford waited, standing near the window, watching the morning formation assemble. He didn't turn when she entered. "You ready for this?" he asked. Sloane stopped beside him, looked out at the same view. "Ready for what?" "Your first class as senior combat instructor." She nodded. "Been ready." Ashford finally turned, looked at her. Really looked. Not at the braces, not at the crutch, at the woman who'd rebuilt herself from broken bones and silent determination. "She'd be proud," he said quietly. Sloane knew who he meant. Captain Aaron Voss, the woman who'd quit 40 years ago, the woman who'd chosen silence, the woman Ashford had failed to save. "I hope so," Sloane said. They stood there for a moment, teacher and student, mentor and warrior. Two people connected by a doctrine that refused to let injury define capability. Then Ashford handed her a folder. "Your roster, 40 candidates, 8 of them female." Sloane opened it, scanned the names, closed it. "They'll need to know what's expected." "They will, because you're going to show them." At 0800 hours, Sloane stood before her first official class. 40 SEAL candidates arranged in formation, eyes forward, posture rigid, waiting. She didn't use notes, didn't reference a manual. Just stood there, braces visible, crutch in hand, spine straight. "They'll test you," she began. Her voice carried across the yard, clear, unwavering. "Some will try to break you. Your job isn't to break back. It's to build something they can't destroy." She paused, let the words settle. Evidence, skill, and the patience to let them bury themselves. From the back of the formation, one of the female candidates met her eyes, held them, understanding passing between them without words. Sloane continued. "Discipline isn't avoiding conflict. It's choosing when to act, and making sure the whole world is watching when you do." The candidates stood straighter, listened harder. Master Chief Ashford watched from the admin building window, arms crossed, expression neutral, but his eyes held something that looked like vindication. After the class, Sloane walked the track alone, the same track where she'd broken the sprint record 3 weeks ago, where this had all started. Ashford approached from behind, matched her pace. "You reminded me why I stayed in this job for 40 years, he said. Sloane glanced at him. "You gave me the tools. I just used them." "No, I gave you permission. You already had the strength." They walked in silence for a full lap. Then Ashford stopped, turned to face her. "What you did wasn't just for you. You know that, right?" Sloane nodded. "I know. Every woman who comes through this program now, every complaint that gets filed, every time someone chooses to stand instead of disappear. That's because you showed them it was possible." She didn't respond, just looked out at the base, at the candidates running drills, at the flags snapping in the morning wind. "It shouldn't have taken this long," she said quietly. "No, it shouldn't have." Another pause. Then Ashford extended his hand. She took it, firm, equal. "Welcome to the fight, Commander, the real one." Sloane smiled, faint, but real. "I've been here the whole time, Master Chief. You just gave me the doctrine to win it." And with that, they walked back toward the compound. 2 warriors, 2 generations, 1 unbreakable legacy. The base had changed, not in structure, not in protocol, but in understanding. That strength wasn't measured in what you could do at full capacity. It was measured in what you refused to let break you when everything was taken away. Lieutenant Commander Sloane Mercer taught that lesson every day, in every class, in every drill, in every candidate who looked at her braces and saw not limitation, but proof that the human will could overcome any obstacle. And somewhere, in records that would outlast them all, the truth was written, not buried, not erased, but preserved. For every future operator who would need to know that when they broke your legs, you didn't have to crawl. You could stand, you could fight, and you could win. The Iron Protocol had been proven, not in theory, but in blood and bone, in unbreakable resolve. And Coronado would never forget it. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning when the base was quiet, Sloan stood alone at the memorial wall near the parade grounds. Her braces were gone now, replaced by a single knee brace on her right leg. She could walk. Not run yet, but walk. She'd been searching the engraved names for 20 minutes before she found it. Captain Aaron Voss, USMC Force Recon, 1957 to 1983. The plaque was small, tucked between two other names, easy to miss if you weren't looking. Sloan placed her hand on the cold metal, felt the grooves of the letters under her fingers. "I finished it," she said quietly, "the fight you started." Footsteps approached from behind. She didn't turn, knew who it was by the cadence. Ashford stopped beside her, looked at the name. His jaw worked once. Then he nodded. "She would have liked you," he said. Sloan shook her head. "She would have been me, if the system had let her." They stood in silence, two people who understood that some battles took 40 years to win, that justice delayed wasn't justice denied, just justice waiting for someone strong enough to carry it across the finish line. "Thank you," Sloan said, not looking at him, just at the name. Ashford's voice was rough, quiet. "For what? For not letting her be forgotten." He didn't respond, just placed his own hand on the plaque, next to hers. 2 generations, 2 fights, 1 victory that belonged to them all. The wind picked up, carried the sound of morning formation in the distance. The base was waking up, moving forward, changed in ways that couldn't be measured in regulations or policy, changed in the understanding that silence was never strength, that speaking truth, no matter how long it took, was the only doctrine that mattered. Sloan stepped back. Ashford did the same. They walked toward the compound together. Not mentor and student anymore, just 2 warriors who'd learned that the hardest battles weren't fought with weapons. They were fought with witness, with evidence, with the refusal to let anyone be erased. And as they walked, the sun broke fully over Coronado, casting light on every corner, every shadow, every place where truth had once been buried. Not anymore.